11,500 years ago, people raised stone pillars here as tall as a two-story house. No names were carved into them, no writing. Just snakes, predators, scorpions, and headless human figures. These structures went up roughly 7,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. In an age with no metal, no writing, no cities. For years, Göbekli Tepe was called humanity's first temple. But the latest excavations tell a more complicated story. Who carved these pillars without a single metal tool, and why? Southeastern Turkey, Şanlıurfa province. A low ridge called Germuş, roughly 770 meters above sea level, overlooking the Harran Plain. The mound itself is a tell, layers of earth built up over millennia of construction, collapse, and rebuilding. About 300 meters across, roughly 15 meters high, around 9 hectares in total. The name Göbekli Tepe means potbelly hill. Nothing in the name hinted at what was buried beneath it. The site was first formally recorded in 1963, during a joint survey by Istanbul and Chicago universities. They found flint tools and worked stone. It was clearly ancient, but no one yet grasped the scale of what lay hidden underground. 31 years later, in 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt examined the hill and noticed the tops of large T-shaped pillars poking through the surface. He suspected monumental early Neolithic architecture lay beneath. Systematic excavation began in 1995, and what emerged changed how we think about the Stone Age. The main monumental structures date to roughly 9,600 to 8,200 BCE. The site was in use from around 9,500 down to about 8,000 to 7,750 BCE, some 1,500 years. This is the pre-pottery Neolithic, before pottery spread widely, before metal, before writing, before the first cities. For scale, Göbekli Tepe predates Stonehenge by roughly 6,000 years, and the Great Pyramid of Giza by roughly 7,000. It isn't the very first structure humans ever built. People had built dwellings before. What's unique is the scale, the monumentality, and the concentration of complex symbolism this early. In 2018, Göbekli Tepe was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So what did archaeologists actually find inside the mound? Large circular and oval enclosures labeled A, B, C, D, F, and H. Between 10 and 20 meters across. A stone wall around the perimeter, T-shaped pillars built into it, stone benches, and at the center, 2 larger pillars facing each other. The biggest known pillars stand about 5 to 5.5 meters tall and likely weigh many tons, possibly around 10 tons or more. Exact figures are hard to pin down. Some pillars remain embedded in the architecture, others are damaged. So it's safer to say many tons than to throw around numbers like 60. Some of the central pillars have carved arms, hands, belts, loincloths. They're clearly stylized figures, but they have no faces. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Who were they meant to represent? Ancestors? Spirits? Mythological beings? There's still no definitive answer. And around these faceless figures is an entire menagerie. Foxes, snakes, boars, aurochs, wild donkeys, lions, vultures, scorpions, insects. Predators and dangerous creatures dominate, often with exaggerated teeth and claws. One of the most famous examples is Pillar 43 in Enclosure D, the so-called vulture stone. It shows a large bird, a scorpion, abstract symbols, and a small headless human figure. Next to the bird sits a round object some interpret as a human head. A popular theory claims this pillar records a comet impact, with the animals standing in for constellations. It went viral online. But most archaeologists treat it with caution. Matching carved animals to star patterns is highly subjective, and the method allows almost any correspondence to be found. There's no scientific consensus here. A more cautious reading links this scene to death and the handling of the dead, which leads to the next mystery. By 2017, Archaeologists had recovered around 700 fragments of human bone from the fill of these buildings. Some show cut marks, deliberate processing, exposure to fire. Especially notable are fragments from 3 skulls with deep, deliberate carved grooves, one with a drilled hole. They may have been suspended or displayed as part of rituals, what researchers call a skull cult. But whether these people were honored ancestors, enemies, or something else entirely remains unknown. Many stone sculptures at the site were also deliberately smashed, heads removed especially often. A ritual killing of the image, a marker that a building's use had ended? The exact reason isn't known. For years, Göbekli Tepe was pictured as an isolated sanctuary, a place hunter-gatherers visited only for rituals, with no one living there permanently. That idea is what made the site world-famous, humanity's first temple. But the deeper archaeologists dug, the more complicated the picture became. They found evidence of food processing, tool-making, and possible domestic structures. The German Archaeological Institute states plainly that new excavations have, for the first time, produced clear evidence of everyday activity and permanent settlement. So Göbekli Tepe may not have been a lonely temple in the wilderness at all, but part of an actual settlement, with monumental buildings existing alongside ordinary daily life. How did people cut and raise these pillars without metal tools? The quarries sat right on the plateau, next to the construction site. Workers outlined a pillar's shape directly on the bedrock, cut a trench around it with flint tools, separated it from the base and moved it, likely using wooden sledges, plant fiber or hide ropes, log rollers and levers. No written account of the process survives. But limestone is a relatively soft rock that responds well to sustained work with flint and stone tools. Metal wasn't required. A 2020 study in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal found a geometric relationship between 3 enclosures, B, C, and D, their centers forming an approximate equilateral triangle. That suggests some buildings may have been planned together, using ropes, stakes, and practical measurement rather than written blueprints. Large stone vessels have also turned up with chemical traces that may point to grain fermentation, hinting at communal feasts involving early fermented drinks. It's not proven this was beer as we'd recognize it today. But the idea of mass gatherings explains a lot. Shared meals could have united different groups, mobilized labor for construction, and accompanied rituals. Göbekli Tepe's builders are often called simple nomads. But by the start of the Neolithic, communities in Upper Mesopotamia were already moving towards settled life, skilled in stonework, and apparently capable of coordinating large collective projects. One long-standing idea held that the entire complex was deliberately and simultaneously buried by its builders, sealed overnight, so to speak. The fill inside these buildings does contain stone, soil, bone, and broken sculpture. But the real picture is messier. Some of that fill likely built up through rebuilding, wall collapse, erosion, and centuries of accumulated debris. Science doesn't support one single coordinated burial ritual. And another myth, that Göbekli Tepe's builders simply vanished. In reality, the region's culture kept evolving, farming spread, architecture changed, and older monumental traditions gradually gave way to new forms of settlement. By the end of the 9th millennium BCE, large-scale construction here wound down. That's not catastrophe or disappearance, it's a slow social transformation. For a long time, Göbekli Tepe seemed one of a kind. Today, though, the same Şanlıurfa region is known to host an entire cluster of related sites, the Taş Tepeler, or Stone Hills Project, Karahan Tepe, Seyburç, Harbetsuvan Tepesi, and others. They too feature T-shaped pillars, monumental enclosures, and anthropomorphic sculpture. Göbekli Tepe, it turns out, wasn't a lone marvel in the desert. It was part of a broad cultural tradition spanning an entire region. Only a small fraction of this enormous mound has been excavated so far. Geophysical surveys suggest many more structures remain buried underground. Göbekli Tepe doesn't need ancient astronauts, a lost super-civilization, or Atlantis. Its real story is more compelling than any of that. 11,500 years ago, people who had no metal and no writing still managed to organize themselves, plan complex structures, raise multi-ton stones, and build a symbolic world whose meaning we still haven't decoded. Göbekli Tepe doesn't prove that human history was hidden from us. It proves how badly we underestimated the people who lived at civilization's very beginning. And with most of the mounds still buried, the question that has stood for millennia remains open. Who were these faceless stone figures, standing at the center of buildings raised at the dawn of human history?